Hello, this is Shabbir Ahmed Bashir from Wajinam and Ravi. I'm the geography optional teacher here, and these are a few videos in a series where I'll be discussing the geography mains 2018 optional paper. It's been some time now, the exam has been over, and just about the time when you can sit back and analyze how you have performed. You could sit down and take a call on what your preparation can be in the months to come. More importantly, many of them would like me to address how difficult or how different, how tricky the paper has been compared to the papers which have been asked earlier and compared to the papers other optionals have had. And more importantly, I think discussing the mains 2018 paper could be a good learning experience for the students who intend to appear the examination in the coming years. So the purpose of the video is not to discuss all the questions, to discuss all the answer and the content, which will not be the right way to address what can be asked in the coming years. The purpose is to tell you how one could have answered. I am assuming that a student who is appearing examination knows a fair amount of geography already. The basic concepts, the basic coverage, you already have done a bit of answer writing practice. Now, how could a student with that kind of a base deal with the questions and probably get content from different topics, from different units, and put them together to make the answer a good, nice, organized answer? Essentially, maximizing from what you already know. So I'm picking up very specific questions. I will not pick up questions at random. Some specific questions that I think will help you understand what I'm talking about. Now, the questions, if I'm organizing and listing them, I can see there are 4 types of questions that you have been asked. Unlike the previous years where there were questions which were beyond the syllabus, where questions were difficult to even attempt, and many of the questions were very, very lengthy to answer. This time I think the geography paper has been very well balanced. I cannot see any questions that I can dismiss as entirely beyond syllabus. So that way I think it's a good question paper. But as far as the quality of questions concerned, the quality of the question is definitely for those who understand geography and have done enough answer writing. The answers require a lot of applied content. The answers require that you should be able to relate topics across themes. You have to use contemporary examples. There are a lot of applied, and some of the questions also probe you in how your understanding has developed on some areas. So it is not a question paper that somebody who has just covered the syllabus without discussing the questions can attempt. This paper will be good for those who have some experience in already taking up questions which are tricky. So my guess, the marks range could vary quite a bit. Those who score well can really score very well. The marks can touch and cross some of the highest marks. Otherwise, if you try attempting the questions with your regular content without much of imagination, the marks can also be fairly low. Compared to other optionals, I think geography can be rated as a moderately difficult paper, whereas I've heard about other optionals where some papers have been tougher. This has not been the case for geography. So overall, I think I'm happy with the question paper, the width, the quality, and the purpose with which they have asked. Now we enter into discussing the specific questions. I have organized the questions under 4 categories. One is the regular type of questions that I think require just about enough content from a syllabus, nothing tricky, straightforward questions. Second are questions that are a bit more lengthy. You need to put in lot of things and the marks allocated to them is not befitting the content that they demand. I can see at least 2-3 questions where the content is probably worth 20-25 marks, but they've asked under 10 marks. Some questions are 15 marks, but if we write it down, it probably is worth maybe 30 marks. So some of the questions were lengthy. Then there were questions that required a lot of thinking, required you to bring a lot of content together. They were not straightforward questions. And these questions were mainly from the topic of geographical thought or perspectives in human geography. I repeat, the questions are not difficult here, but they do require some bit of extra understanding. And finally, there are applied type of questions where you had to relate it with some event that has happened. You had to give examples from and case studies from some contemporary issues which has been in news, like the questions on energy security, questions related to problems of sea level rise, questions related to urban development and problems. So broadly, these 4 type of questions is what they have focused on. Now, the regular questions, I do not think you need to do much. You should have written those answers pretty fast. For example, question number 1, I'm looking at paper number 1, section A. The first question number 1, A, which was landscape is a function of structure, process and stage. Critique the statement. This is a regular question, which I think anybody who has studied a bit of Davis will understand this. The only challenge I can see in this question is the word critique the statement. A student who doesn't understand this word invariably would end up explaining what the sentence means. So you probably will end up explaining how landscapes are a reflection of the structure, how landscapes are the consequence of processes, and how landscapes reflect the stage of the landforms or landscapes evolution. So you trying to explain it is not what this question actually demanded. The explanation part could have been put in a small schematic, maybe 1 or 2 paragraphs, not more than that, and you should have moved on towards evaluating the statement. The word critique here means something like comment, okay, be critical of, evaluate what this sentence means and what ultimately it was used to explain, whether the statement is comprehensive to explain all aspects of landform development. This statement was given by Davis. So you have to explain, did Davis do justice to the statement that he had coined, or do we have other theories, other concepts which capture the concept of structure and process control more effectively? So criticism along with some evaluation is what this question demanded. I'll still rate this as a regular question because almost all of us would have read this. You had to relate it with what Penck had in the ideas of process, relate it with what Stoller talked about equilibrium, talk about what ideas of Gilbert was taken up as a part of understanding landscape and the forces of resistance. If you have done the evaluation, I think this answer was good enough. The second type of a regular question was probably question number 1D. Distinguish between intrazonal and azonal soils. I think you cannot have a question more simpler than this. Straight away define what intrazonal is, what azonal is, have a schematic, okay, a kind of flow chart where you can list down intrazonal soils are classified on what basis. The local rocks, the local water, logging aspects, give examples. And what azonal are, azonal transported soils, okay, fluvial, we have got aeoline, we have the glacial. So short discussion. And the more important part could have been also on the basis of describing the characteristics and importance of the zonal soils, azonal soils. Now, if I divide this answer, it should have been probably half-half, half to distinguish intrazonal and azonal, and another half you should have focused on describing only azonal. My guess is Students, while writing the first part, would have got carried away and written a bit more on distinguishing the two and not spent as much words on describing the characteristics and importance of the azonal soil. Not much to add because content is something I assume you all know on this. Another question which is of the regular kind that doesn't require too much of reading and analyzing is question number 2A. Evaluate how far Kober's geosynclinal theory explains mountain building process. I'm assuming you have done a syllabus well. Even if the syllabus mentions just geosyncline as a concept, and the syllabus very specifically mentions what are the more recent theories in mountain building, even then, Kober's theory should have been studied. The only thing that you had to do here was you had to evaluate Kober and not explain Kober. So don't tell us what all Kober say, but go a step beyond telling us if what he said was right or if what he said was wrong. And why was he right and why was he wrong? In evaluation of this, you had to compare Kober with some of the other theories, like evaluating Kober in the context of what Harold Jeffrey says that mountains are wrinkles on the Earth's crust. Kober has a better take. He talks about geosynclines, processes that compress the geosynclines and sediments being folded up rather than simply wrinkles on the Earth's crust. That's one point. Second point is you can discuss how Kober talks about the geosynclines sediments being of marine origin. So that's a better way to explain why fold mountains have sedimentary rocks of marine origin. So that's a positive of Kober's theory. The positive of Kober theory is also that he sees fold mountains as a consequence of compressive forces. I mean, that's perhaps the most important critical aspect of how fold mountains are formed. So Kober is among the first ones to have said this, and that too as a part of a proper theory. And then you can compare Kober's ideas with the drift theory of Wegener. Wegener doesn't talk about geosynclines, he talks about scraping of the ocean floor and the sediments piling up on the leading edge. And because of which, Wegener cannot explain the mountains which are located within the continent, say Himalayas or Tian Shan or Ural mountains. So in that context, perhaps Kober is much better. So that's the third point of evaluating how it's better than Wegener. One of the flaws, the minuses of Kober was that his explanation about why the compressive forces operate and the genesis of the forces is where probably he made a big mistake. That he sees compressive forces as a consequence of thermal contraction process, which is incorrect. The compressive forces are tectonic in origin. So that's the minus. And another minus was while discussing the stages in the upliftment of the fold mountains, he talks about the stage called as tectogenesis, which is a stage where he says a lot of structures of the rocks are formed, including volcanism, including emplacement of magmatic matter into the layers of the rocks. So if you had discussed the Kober's theory under this treatment, where you're evaluating that there are 4 pluses and there are 3 or 4 minuses, then you would have answered this question. Otherwise, this continues to be a straight regular question that doesn't require too much of reading beyond what you should have known. And of course, question number 2B, critically examine the basis and the scheme of climatic classification proposed by Thevartha. Very straight question. The basis continues to be vegetation. The basis was taking a stand in support of Köppen's classification. The basis is monthly average temperature. The basis fundamentally is the vegetation de Candoll's map. And yes, with modification that he wanted to also include the causative factors. So there is a touch of genetic character also in his classification. And the modifications very specifically he made for the monsoon type, the boundaries of the C and D, the boundaries he modified for the D type. how he brings in the idea of universal thermal scales. These four questions were the straight types, which I believe most of you should have handled with some bit of ease, okay, compared to other questions. In the following videos, I will discuss the other type of questions that require a bit of different treatment, either in terms of how you understand that question or in terms of how you write and elaborate your points. So please keep watching to learn and understand a bit more on how we could have done better.